underway, but I want to go ahead and get started because we do have people on Zoom. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for the Pinellas Realtor, Central Pasco, and Greater Tampa Realtors for hosting us here in their facility. We are recording this, so again, don't worry if you signed up, you'll get a hard copy to review, so if it seems a little bit overwhelming, we're going to cover all of that today. The other thing to know is many of us that you will see today on the panel are people whose homes flooded. We're not living in them like many of you, and we're learning as we go. We just thought the best way is to share with each other and then create information. Many of my realtor friends are here, and they are amazing servant leaders in their communities that can help our neighbors navigate through this as well. This URL that you see on the screen and the QR code will let you access a document that has the contact information of the people you see, as well as some other resources we've identified. We will add to it some more later. And then under my name, under Cindy Hayden, there is a Storm Smart guide of 14 pages that again will give you a list of resources and questions and things that we're finding. Just one girl's journey through the storm. So hopefully that helps and hopefully you can help others through it. What we wanted to start with was the Realtor Association, the National Association of Realtors, after 9/11, they created something called the Realtor Relief Foundation. And many people think that that means you have to be a realtor to benefit, but what it was is you saw the need in the community to help people be the heroes of hope and get them money while we're still navigating getting insurance money or other funds out there. And so, with the help of Florida Realtors and the National Association of Realtors and the local Realtor Association, there are funds available for one of three categories. If you have a primary home that was damaged in the storm and you have a mortgage, you're eligible for $1,000. If you rent a primary home that was made you have to be out of it, you're eligible for $1,000. And if you're someone who owns a home that you lived in, but many of our residents don't have a mortgage, but you're paying to live somewhere else, you can be eligible for $1,000. And so we just thought, at this time of year, in the holidays, if we could get in front of people and help get it to our neighbors that can really benefit, it's not something you pay back. You just submit the information. It takes about 2 weeks, and then you get a check in the mail and you spend it as you would. But our goal as realtors is to help people have a roof over their head and be able to navigate as quickly as possible. And so what I'm going to share with you now is I printed off for myself what you will see when you go to that application. I just want to give you a little idea of what you're going to need. In the document is a link to get to the application online, so you don't have to do it, on paper. However, some of my neighbors have told me, hey, that's great, but I lost my computer in the storm, I lost my printer in the storm, like I don't have the stuff to upload this, and it's just a little stressful. Anybody else have a little friction and stress as we navigate all of this? So I have realtor friends in the room, and we have realtor friends in the community that if you need to connect, use our company printer, scanner, etc., we will help you get that in. Sound good? Okay, so don't let that be a reason to be deterred on getting this opportunity to help yourself or your neighbors. So you're going to put in your name and your email and where the property was damaged. This is all confidential. It goes to, we have a committee at Florida Realtors, our disaster relief committee. It's a small group, and they clear the documents for our realtor fund and this fund. So in an effort to make sure that we're getting it to the right people, you will just share what was the total cost of damage, get an estimate's fine. What was the uninsured loss? Again, put whatever you is there. Any financial assistance, again, just asking for basic stuff. I mean, if FEMA gave you $750, just write FEMA $750. I think the confusing part, and I wanted to show this, is it's going to ask you for a series of things just to substantiate. So one is a copy of your driver's license. It's all confidential. But that's to make sure that your driver's license is at the primary residence that they're giving you money for, okay? Then it says It says the document showing the correct address and it doesn't match. So if you have a utility bill or other stuff, and we're not trying to make it hard, we're just trying to make sure that we're substantiating it. And then it says, do you want a mortgage payment, or rent costs, or temporary housing through something we talked about, or property damage repaired or primary residence. It asks, do you have insurance? That doesn't affect whether you qualify or not. And then it says you need to show one of the following. So you need to show, you really are going to need to show photos of the damage. And then the next ones are where I ran into friction, and so I just want to share with you how to navigate. It says, do you have an insurance claim or estimates? Do you have written claim or settlements? Do you have contractor estimates? And do you have receipts for complete repairs? Okay, I was like, no. Anybody else have that? You're like still figuring all that out, trying to get all that. So here's what we do. We just get a piece of paper that says, I don't have it yet. And then just scan it up so that the form doesn't not let you finish. Make sense? So I really wanted to share this today because sometimes you start something and then it's just like, I called when I had it happen and I was like, I can't get this to work. So that's what you need to do. And then at the bottom you just you submit your name and the date that it's an affidavit that that's the truth. So does that make sense? Does that feel like it's doable? Any questions? I do have lovely, helpful elves in the back that are going to answer any questions. They can show you what this looks like with the form that you're going to see if you have any questions. But in this document, the first thing you'll see is a link on how to access that online. Make sense? So I know there were still people, again, getting here with traffic and stuff, but that was the part that I had. Let me look around and see. Bridget? My moderator, my first meeting. Well, in the interim, I will say that I want to thank, we've got our vice president here from the Pennsylvania organization, as well as Andy Gonzalez is here from Florida Realtors. He is our public policy vice president in Tallahassee and in Florida Realtors. And there's a lot of things that we're working on that you're going to hear about tonight, but that we're working on in that respect. And then Andy, I don't know, I saw where we just got through a disaster tax credit at the national level.
That's correct, yep.
Do you have any couple words about what that is and what to expect?
Just saw it this morning, so I do not.
Yeah, so they were working on it for a while after Hurricane Ian, but be on the lookout. And again, realtors can help you get an update. We just got it this morning and that's going to pass. And so hopefully, maybe at the federal level, some of our income taxes or other tax credits stuff come through. Can somebody look for Bridget for me, please?
Candace already went up.
Perfect.
Cindy?
Yes.
Right at the beginning of all this mess, I got something from DBPR saying you can apply for a loan for this much money, whatever. So I applied, couldn't do anything else, so I applied for that, and they got a notice saying realtors weren't eligible. And so I sent back probably a little snotty that said, well, why the heck did you send it to me? You send it to me. Do you know anything about that? I mean, I'm looking for little bits anywhere I can get.
Sure. I do not, but I'm sure you said something? Okay. Andy has something he'll share, he can share on that. But as you have questions or stuff, and again, like I said, we're keep learning together. David Bennett, our CEO here at Council Central Pasco, Team Craig is in the house. So you just want to say hi? Okay, thank you. I will say that we had a great response of over 140 people and many people online. So again, we wanted to make, for those in person, be able to have somebody to step through any of these realtor relief questions. It is on first come, first served basis. So, as you know, people first and get their application in. At this time, I would like to turn it over, I forgot to say my little piece, sorry. Okay, so as we start talking in community with, amazing people in the community, or meet some of them today, but I started saying, tell me if you can relate to this. I started seeing 6 ways to lose my house that I navigated through this, and so we're playing for the whole kahuna. And so I actually today counted, and I just will share quickly, 8 ways that you can lose your house on the other side of the storm. And so we're kind of about through 4 of them. Hopefully you've navigated, it's like whack-a-mole, hopefully you've navigated this far, but it's like the landmines we're all trying to avoid. So that's really where this whole town hall came out of, was how can we get people good information that they don't find out after they did the tilt-a-wheel that, hey, now you can't fix your house. So I'm gonna share these, and then if there's any that you've seen, like, let us know, because we'll continue to help that information get out there. But you know, one of the first things that none of us really knew was when the storm happened and you went to tear out debris in the house, nobody said that, again, we're gonna be assessed a debris and demolition fee from FEMA toward against our 50% rule, right? So people that could have cut out 4 feet of drywall, cut out 8, that's 8 feet going out and an 8 feet cost for each coming in, right? So again, as we go forward, we're trying to document this to help other people in the future. Too much remediation costs. I mean, I know people now, and you know, there's companies that do that and they have bills of $40,000, $45,000, et cetera. And so, you know, again, nobody really understood how that would, and who, the insurance doesn't really pay all that, you know? So again, a lot of out of pocket at the time was really tough. So one of my clients ended up getting an insurance payout recommendation that was greater than her 50% rule. Now, I was a little envious at first because I got one way low in my opinion, but you know, again, we're all managing that 50%. So if your 50% is $100,000 and your insurance company says they want to pay you $150,000, realize you also just admitted you're substantially damaged. So you need to kind of be aware and work through those things. Your FEMA letter, and we have next week here from the Pinellas Property Appraiser, you might go out there and that number is low, again, based on when you bought the property, what they have and how well updated that they've been made. And so we're gonna talk about that, but that historically, he'll tell you, is traditionally low. Well, if it's lower than the work that is being recommended to be done, that's gonna be an issue. If you get contractors, they give you quotes that are too high or they don't manage their budget, it can push you over the 50% rule. And that's where we've got people here today, and we're starting that conversation with you in February. So now we got to this point, we're starting to rebuild. There's a bunch of landmines that we gotta all be mindful of as we go through that. When you go to do that, you might also find the contractors all right, hey, well, you don't know, we don't know until we start doing stuff. But I'm seeing things like, if they find electrical that has to be updated, that can be a big number. For myself, my AC went, and it's not the AC unit, that'll be covered, but all the improvements, the cost of compliance of raising the AC, and all those things are not covered, and again, add to the cost of the project. The biggie is I experienced at my insurance company, the adjuster went through, I have windows in the front and back of my house perfectly fine, they were covered with metal storm shutters, and they said, oh, we'll replace all those. Well, my windows are the old windows, so they would give me like $1,800, but the new windows, if you go to Hurricane Code Windows, it's like $30,000. Now, if those windows are perfectly good, you might want to really ask yourself and navigate before you start adding 40, 50,000 in windows if your windows are okay and you're trying to manage the 50%. So the biggest thing I learned is that the FEMA 50% and what your insurance pay are two different things. And sometimes people are feeling there's free money over here where the insurance company's being super generous. I didn't get that guy. But it's equally bad if they're trying to overpay you because it's going to put you over that 50% rule. So just be really, again, this is the time to ask questions. I say measure twice, cut once. And then the final thing that I experienced last year when I did a remodel on my house with all permitted work is that the cost that your contractor paid or that you can do it for is not necessarily the cost of what the city's going to put on your 50% rule. So the best example I can give is I got a new roof. It was $10,000. I paid the contractor $10,000. The city said that's great, but the labor and the cost of a new roof, we say, is $14,000. And the tax basis you're going to be taxed on is $14,000, and your 50% is going to be $14,000. Now I paid $10,000. So as we're navigating this, realize that like your contractor's going to give you a quote, but it's important to then find out what is the city going to charge in the total picture against the 50%. And that is really why, guys, that I'm seeing that the city wants a substantial damage package altogether. Because the worst thing to do is start doing parts of the repairs and find out that in total, somehow it's gonna go over. So they're really trying to protect people from spending money and doing things that, are not gonna work out well. So those are 8 of the things I've found so far on my fun little journey. If you have some, please share and let us all continue to help each other. As you're gonna find today, we put together a document so you have more information when you go away to kind of, as you're hitting these things, and we try to give good resources. So now I'll turn it over to the wonderful Bridget Bello with the Tampa Bay Business and Wealth Magazine. She'll be our MC tonight for the panels. And again, look forward to staying in contact, sharing, and learning together. Thank you so much.
You guys hear me? Yes. I think Cindy and I could do this whole entire event just based on our experience as people who have lived through what we're all living through right now. So I wanted to say thank you to Cindy and the other panelists. I'm not here because I'm the publisher of the Tampa Bay Business and Wealth. I'm here because I'm also a storm survivor. And it's been a hell of a ride. So thank you guys for having me. We have an amazing panel today. We have Nicole Tinderholt, who is also a Pinellas County resident and owner of Lowe's Commercial Painting. Sydney Hayden, who you just met, the Madeira Beach resident, past president of the Pinellas Realtor Organization. Suzanne Perkins, Madeira Beach resident, public adjuster and associate at Ray Engineering. Barry Scar, Reddington Beach resident and vice president of Excentria Insurance. Chris Eastman, Pinellas County resident and owner of Fieldstone Landscape and Revolution Home Services, being represented by Derek. Mike Twitty, Pinellas County property appraiser. David Ryder, a real estate attorney with Berlin, Patton, and Ebling. Tina Housden, she's leader, I don't want to put my glasses on, but I can't read. Tina Housden is Leader One Financial Corporation. Stephanie Taylor, she's a private client advisor at Hub. And we've got other people in the room that are experts on raising homes, appraisal experts, different experts like that we may call out periodically. We do have 2 set panels. We do have a lot of information to cover. We also do have time for question and answer built into the agenda. So if you've got something, if you just jot it down and hold it until we get to the Q&A part. If you can't stand it, stand up and I'll do my best to stop and give you the opportunity. But just amazing people that I have to say all are giving their time for free. Nobody is getting paid. There's no sponsorships. There's no anything with this event. This is all people who just want to help. So we all hope that you leave here today with some information that you can use and that will help you through this journey. So Cindy is the first person I'm going to call up on the panel because, as I said, her and I are both living this nightmare, and I know many of you are too, or you wouldn't be here. And we're going to start with navigating claims with insurance. Cindy's going to talk about some of the things that have surprised her, more so than what she just shared with you, I believe. And I'll talk about some of the things that have surprised me as well. So, Cindy?
Thanks. Oh, good, there was water here. Well, I think when we were talking, some of the things that came up was how unprepared I was. How many of you have always heard, like, take photos and prepare? And in this digital age, I thought I'd done a good job with video, but really the insurance people need photos. And so I think that's been a challenge. And then as we get the quote, and it's lower than what my neighbors are getting and lower than what my contractor's getting, I'm like, how do I start a job that is not going to cover it? And right now, as realtors, we didn't work for 2 months, so I'm still playing catch up. I'm blessed that, I've closed quite a bit this month, but, just figuring out, I don't want to commit to a contractor and then not be able to pay them everything. So that's been an interesting thing to try to figure out. And then for my contents, trying to do your whole house is hard. And I had an experience 30 years ago with a house fire, so I know that we shortchange ourselves. We just get tired and feel silly listing all the things that are $5 here, $10 here, and yet it adds up. So I did find a couple tips that I would share, like as you're going through it, is if you're an online shopper, tell your husband or your spouse, like, see, it all paid off. So I was able to print out 500 receipts and group them by year and go through and reconstruct a lot of my life. I told my husband he was not allowed to see any of that, just be grateful. I was like, just be grateful. So I'm still navigating. I'm still trying to appeal and do some of that stuff. But I think again, couple things for the future is just really how important photos are. And I really am starting a new mantra that every June when it's hurricane season, it should be, photograph your home and like update it. And even our realtor family can come out and like do that for our friends and family because it really, really made a difference. And these storms came so quickly that it can catch you off guard. But I think I'm hoping to hear from our other panelists things about when you're in this process, the communication is kind of through different layers. You had an adjuster who reports to the insurance company who nobody, is talking. It's very different. And so I just want to know how to do the right things so that I can get my family back in our house and not end up being out of pocket. And so hopefully we've got some experts here that are going to give us some good advice. But again, those were just some of the things that kind of surprised me is that I have full coverage, $250,000 and $100,000, but getting that coverage has been there's been challenges, and so I just imagine that other people too, But then I hear my neighbors who they paid them too much, and they're like, well, now I might lose my house because they offered to pay too much. So then I was feeling grateful that I wasn't losing my house. So it's like just looking through that. So yeah, those are the things that I saw.
So I could spend the whole 2 hours talking about the things that surprised me, honestly, but I think the biggest one was when we realized that we were not going to be able to get back into the house, that the National Flood Insurance Program does not provide alternative living expense dollars. That was a big shock for me. The fact that we are required to take care of that ourselves and that FEMA won't help you if you have flood insurance. And so then you ask yourself, why do I have flood insurance? So that was a big surprise for me. Fortunately, Cindy shared with me that realtor program, and I have applied, and my fingers are crossed. There have been other resources that have been out there to help, but this is not my first hurricane. We actually lost our house in 2017 to Hurricane Irma, and had the distinct pleasure of being told by the city manager that we were the only single-family home in all of Pinellas County that was lost in that storm. We're like, thank you. He told me on Valentine's Day, too. I was like, you had to call me today and tell me that? So I thought I was an expert. I thought I knew everything. I was like, I got this. We've done this before. It's a very different experience dealing with flood than it is dealing with homeowners. And for Irma, it was homeowners for us. And so that was where that kind of alternative living expense dollar surprise came from. I also wrongly thought that the outside, the dock, the landscaping, those things were covered. I realized that I apparently had not done a good job of reading my policy. So if there's anything that I would impart to you is actually read that stuff. I know it's bad. It's like bad. It's really bad. But actually read that stuff because that was a big, big surprise to me. And I thought that the previous experience was going to be helpful, as I said. But the other thing that I learned was being the only kept us under the radar. Now that we have this mass destruction, it's actually a really, really bad thing because I had none of these issues with Irma. So I went back to the person who told me it was Mark Woodard at the time, and said, actually, I'm really grateful that we were the only house in Pinellas County that was lost in that storm because we were completely off the radar, right? So I think a huge part of what we're going to learn about today is what's happening to us because of the mass destruction that has happened through this process. So we're going to start with some insurance conversations. So I need to call up to the stage Barry, Stephanie, David Ryder, Mike Twitty, and Cindy's already up here. And again, these are people who have given their time freely, and we appreciate you very much and your expertise very much because we all still have questions. Are we sharing? We're passing a mic?
Well, there's three
Okay.
down there, I think.
Okay. All right, so Stephanie or Barry, let's start with the difference between wind and hurricane deductibles. What are they and why?
Well, go ahead. All right, well, good evening. The wind deductible, So, first of all, I want to just say something broad about how the big picture is working. I think it's important to realize the flood adjusters, these are independent adjusters that the flood servicing carrier works with and pays to adjust the claim, mostly the field work, coming out and investigating your house and, checking everything. I think it's important to note the flood adjusters are incentivized to settle your claim. To settle the claim, to pay, okay? Versus the private market, who the wind carriers are incentivized to deny your claim. Many of you may have seen the segment on 60 Minutes last month with Heritage Insurance. Pretty damning situation for them. And they were fined over $1 million because of their inaction with Hurricane Ian. So the private carriers, they're the ones that we all get into litigation with public adjusters and legal firms that specialize in that kind of work. Flood is pretty black and white, okay? And they're going to pay. They're looking for ways to increase your claim. They're not looking for ways to deny your claim. So you have to help them do that, okay? And there's ways you can do that by giving them a lot of information and how, about your claim and, the estimates and et cetera. But just so you know, that's the kind of the big picture feel. The deductibles for the hurricane on your wind are very high, okay? They're 2 to 5% of the insured value of your home. So, sometimes they start around 10 or 15,000 and they end up around 50,000. So a lot of people never file a claim. In a condominium association, the deductibles are sometimes $500,000. They will never file a claim. Some of these high-rise fire-resistant buildings, it's really tough, and they're paying a fortune for the coverage. Flood insurance is much lower. The deductibles start, I think, around $1,200. You can get $5,000. You can get them higher. And so the idea is to get several quotes and figure out where you want to be, but they're low. They're fixed, not a percentage, and they're a flat deductible
Great.
on the flood.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I guess that would be another one of my big surprises that I left out was not all insurance agents are created the same. And in my case, Chuck Wasson, if any of you guys have him, never offered me $100,000 in contents. And I did not know that I had access to it. And so we said we were going to go back to the basics on this. Each and every one of us has access to $250,000 for the dwelling and $100,000 for contents. But no one tells you that. I was never offered that. So that's another thing to watch out for.
That's interesting because their commission is based on you buying.
It's really
it.
interesting. Yeah.
It's like you not offering to sell their house.
Yeah.
I don't know, but anyways.
So make sure you are fully covered because I was definitely underinsured for my contents. How do carriers, so here's my question, right? So everyone tells you make a flood claim, make a homeowner's claim, right? I did both. They both did this. And the homeowner's claim said this was clearly a flood event after
Correct.
Helene, right?
And that is correct.
It was not a wind event.
Helene,
Right,
Milton, wind.
right. To which I responded, I was not home. I do not know where the water came from. I evacuated like I was told to. And last I checked, what was pushing that water into my house was wind.
Right. So, but when there's a tidal surge of water coming up from the either a lake or the salt water, that's the definition of a flood. Okay, water coming in through the roof, through the windows, wind-induced water. That's going to be a hurricane wind claim. So that's.
So it's based on, just to clarify, they automatically, it's based on no matter who you are, no matter where you are, on whether or not there was rising water.
Yeah, rising water.
Okay.
And, you know, it can also come from storm sewers that back up. So we have a lot of areas in St. Pete, in Milton also, that had storm sewer backup, and that is a flood also. As long as it floods a certain, was it a couple of acres?
1 acre
Stephanie?
or two, it's 1 acre or 1 acre or 2 adjacent properties.
Right. So there's a definition there, but storm sewers that back up, that don't properly function or are overloaded, that is also considered flood claim, okay?
So Stephanie, I'm glad you spoke up because I want to ask you this next question. Are there common limitations or exclusions in Florida that we should know about or be looking for with our homeowners insurance?
Yes. Unfortunately, I write all over the country, and Florida has some of the worst policy forms there are. And most people have no idea that there are limitations. Most of our Florida homes are older, and the limitations start getting more and more limiting the older your homes are. Some pretty common ones on the homeowner property damage side is most older homes, and now a lot of times older homes are anything 20 years or older, have water damage limitations. And it comes in two parts. I would say probably half of our carriers have what's called a 14-day hidden or not limitation, which means you can have a slow leak behind your walls, not know anything's going on until it's a big problem. But if the insurance carrier can prove it's been 14 days, slow little drip behind the walls, they will decline it. A lot of them will also throw on, for the older homes, a $10,000 water damage limit. I don't know about you if you've ever had a water loss, but if you have a hose in your washer and it goes, that's easy. I mean, the water, it goes everywhere. It's detrimental, it's huge, it's massive, and $10,000 does not go very far. So most older homes in Florida are getting $10,000 water limitations. There are a few carriers that will add it back on. And when I say a few, I mean truly just a few. If you'll install things like water security, some sort of water monitoring, whether it's on the main flow of the house, behind every water source, or if you replumb your home, which most people do not. So there are some workarounds to it, and there are some carriers that are willing to add it back for a cost. But yeah, that's the most common one when it comes to the property damage side. But even on the liability side, most carriers don't automatically include personal injury. So if someone sues you for defamation, anything like that, anything that you could be personally liable for, it's not automatically included. Most of the time you have to add it in. There are animal liability limitations. So you think, oh, I've got a dog, it's fine. And, you know, I've said that I have a dog. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's covered. So, and even then, a lot of times all you're going to get is $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 for that. So those are the most common on the homeowner side limitations that almost nobody knows about.
Yeah, so just continuing in that vein. And I meant to say, Mike or David or Cindy, if you have anything you want to add and jump in, this is not all the Stephanie and Barry show. They just happen to be our experts in this topic. But what about pools? What about docks?
So docks, it depends. So if there is a wind event, most of the time, most of your other structures, your fences, your hardscaping, your docks, not covered. The best thing that could happen is a boat runs into your dock, or it gets struck by lightning and catches on fire, because those are pretty much the only times your docks are covered. So that's what you're really praying for, is for that. Same with flood. Nothing's covered on the flood side except for the main dwelling, unless you've got it specifically insured, or you have private flood insurance, or you have, you know, there are specialty products out there that aren't really insurance that could put you back whole too.
And typically, in my experience, in speaking with a lot of our insureds, flood basically covers building and contents in building. That's it. So all of these items outside the pools, all these other areas around your property or a condo, and pool decks and pools and all this stuff, they're just not covered. Flood doesn't cover outside the building.
Or inside your garage.
So two things that surprise people, so I'm going to share them here. One is I got my parents to evacuate, and they're in a home, and the pool is, with 15 inches of rain, over flooding into the house. So that's flooding, but it's not covered, is it?
I mean, it depends if that's the only flooding. that's not gonna be covered because the rule of flood is it has to be 1 acre or 2 adjacent properties.
So you want your neighbor's pool to flood as well, just sharing.
Yes.
You want to live next
Yeah.
to someone with a pool, okay?
Or have a 1 acre pool.
Or have a one. I
It's
like how
tricky.
you
It's
think.
flood insurance, it's a government program, and I think that a lot of people, it's a government program. It's not really insurance, so it is very black, white, no gray.
So here's one more thing that catches people off guard is, there was a time when people had those sunken living rooms, you know how the designs of sunken living rooms? And I see people, this would be an interesting thing on the Florida rooms that were like down, but when you see a room confirmed that steps down, that's not covered. They consider that a basement. Did you know you have basements in Florida? It's your basement. So I have a very good friend whose their whole living room was a sunken, and it flooded, and the person was like, "You've been paying flood insurance all this time. It's not covered. Your stuff's not covered because you're in a basement."
I think that depends, Cindy. For example, I have a living room like that steps down, but it steps down to grade. So there are some that are sunken that go drop below grade. So I think those are the ones they consider a basement.
That's the key.
I'll confirm that here. So essentially what happens is if you're already below grade, that's what your problem's gonna be, is, okay, you're already below, now you're really in trouble because you've stepped further below what your flood insurance already was at. So if you step down at that point, you're in trouble. If it only goes down to grade, then you're fine.
Okay,
So-
so clarify. I think that means like if your house is not in a flood zone and you're up, then the sunken would not. But for those of
Yeah.
us, the person I'm thinking of lived in a
So for
flood
the
zone.
BFE, yeah, you gotta stay, if you're above BFE, then you're good on that part.
Awesome. Well, there I
So,
learned something
but,
new. It's perfect
so,
place of
and this
mission.
also
Thanks,
comes
Becky.
in because now we're having a whole bunch of blasts because Citizens is now requiring flood insurance for that aspect. And I'm gonna throw it back to y'all on that because you guys would know what the flood insurance policy for that particular aspect would look like for if you were in flood zone X, Citizens requiring it because you're now over $600,000. My interpretation of the rule is that it would still be included in that. However, you're also going to hear a lot of, because I'm the attorney here, it's going to be an "it depends" answer because there is an entire group of people that are insurance litigators in this world and will fight every broad stroke rule that you try to create, right? It's a cottage industry. They've done very well for themselves. I wish I could make some of that money on that. But they will fight to state that, hey, it steps down, it's above BFE, it's above grade on that aspect, therefore it should still be part of the coverage, okay?
Does anyone else think that it's called BFE is funny?
Yeah.
By design, I'm sure. All right, well, I wanted to make sure that I noted we do have about 50 people joining us on Zoom. And so thank you to them. I don't know what they're looking at, but also that we're recording all of this. So don't feel like you have to take copious notes because you'll be able to go back and refer to the things that the experts are saying. Barry, big part of what we are all dealing with as survivors is trying to decide whether or not to elevate our homes. Can you talk about what is covered under the lowest elevated floor?
So that's a big question. I've not dealt with an elevated flood claim before because we haven't had too much flooding. Most of I specialize in a lot of condos, and the older buildings are, on grade. They're not elevated, and so everything's covered. On the flood policy, everything is covered. So it's different. What we're experiencing with elevated buildings now is a lot of these condos and homes, a lot of homes, have greatly improved the ground floor area. They've put in offices, they've got enhanced garages, a lot of improvements. Now with Helene, we're fine. It's not covered, but I'm paying for flood insurance. And I've got a lot of homeowners that it's unbelievable. So again, as Stephanie said, it's black and white. We'll take an act of Congress to change this, literally, okay? It is an act of Congress. This is through Congress. So there are items that are covered below the lowest elevated floor, okay? The ground level of an elevated building. And there are quite a few things. It's air conditioners, electrical junction breakers, circuit breakers, electrical outlets, switches, elevators, The elevators are covered. Dumbwaiters, related equipment, et cetera. Fuel tanks, furnaces, heat pumps, pumps and tanks, solar energy systems, stairways, staircases, some pumps, water softeners, required utility connections, footings and foundations, cleanup of all of the area immediately in the footprint of that building. Any cleanup, that's covered under the flood. Clothes, washer, dryers, food freezers other than walk-in. But what's not covered? Drywall, wood. That's the big one. And drywall or insulation contents of any finished walls, floors, and ceilings. So, and that's what people want covered. I think that all this finished work below the elevated floor is covered, and it's just not. So people are coming to that realization. You know, I know a lot of people that have very nice homes that are elevated, and I ask them, what is your flood premium? $800. Oh, well, mine is $4,000. That's the difference, okay? So the slab on grade, you know, non-elevated homes, they pay a lot for flood. And now with the new 2.0 risk rating, which NFIP went into effect a year ago, April, was the first change since 1970 of how they're rating flood, and it's changing. And they're not using the elevation certificates as much. They're looking at the value of your home and your distance to tidal water or flooding water, and some other factors. And they're going way up. So a premium that I've been paying for years around $2,000 is probably going to end up around $8,000. Okay, and they're going to be increasing the premium up to, was it 18%? I think it's 18% a year. Yeah. So the flood is gearing in to become, you know, much more expensive. Hence, let's, you know, elevate. I mean, that's the whole idea, is to incentivize to do that.
Well, and I was complaining about all the people that I knew that didn't have flood insurance that FEMA just wrote like big $40,000, $50,000 checks to, and Barry was quick to point out that they're not getting $250,000 checks from the flood insurance. So that made me feel a little bit better. Not a lot, but a little bit better. I'm not getting $250,000. Well, the maximum, put it that way. So we're gonna have to speed it up a little bit, or we're never gonna get through all of this information. So quick question, differences in private, excess, and NFIP flood. Stephanie, can you talk about that?
Yeah, NFIP flood is just what it is. It's government program, it's your building, it's your contents. If it's your primary, your building is replacement cost and your contents are actual cash value. If it's secondary, seasonal, not occupied 50% or more, it's actual cash value on your dwelling and your contents. Most people don't know that. Private flood, I'm a big, huge fan of private flood because it's flood. So you can get replacement cost on your home higher than $250,000. You can pick higher deductibles. You can get replacement cost on your contents, and you don't have to take a single picture of every single thing. You don't have to inventory every single thing in an Excel spreadsheet like you do for NFIP flood. You can get additional living expenses. You can get coverage for your pool, for the pool pumps. It's just a much broader policy. Excess flood it would go over top of either a private flood or an NFIP flood, and you can get it up to your total home value. Most people don't because it can be pricey, but it is on top of it. So once you hit your $250,000, if you need additional coverage for your home, if your home is of higher value, you can get additional coverage for both your home and your contents. But the catcher is your primary policy has to be exhausted in order for that to trigger to go into effect.
Great, thank you. Nice and concise. What are the exclusions from flood in all those different cases?
That is a very broad question.
Besides pools and docks?
I think that, you know, situations like the generator most of the time isn't covered under NFIP, and a lot of the private floods will. The pool pumping, it's a certain amount. I think the maximum I've ever written for a pool or a pool pump and all their equipment is $20,000. So it's not always necessarily going to put you back whole, but it's better than nothing. It'll pay for the pool cleaning. So, I mean, the private flood has a lot better options, and it's a true flood policy. So there aren't as many weird limitations as NFIP.
And just in broad numbers, difference in cost?
It depends. So if your older Florida home slab on the water, it's probably, if you're paying $2,000 for NFIP in a 1970 ranch style house on the water, you're probably gonna pay double. If you're inland or you're elevated or it's newer, it's comparable.
Got it. Thank
So
you.
can I just share two things on that? If you have an NFIP from before October 2021, I think, you are grandfathered rate. So if you give that up for private, you never get that back. So when I bought my house on the water, it was from somebody that didn't have flood insurance. They were self-insured. So I live in a 1,700 square foot house. My flood is 7,700. And so the private was 12,000. So it just gives you a feel. So before you make any change, really make sure you know what you're doing because there is no going back. So that's all, just.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you for that. How do we know if our flood policy is going to pay replacement cost or actual cash value?
Well, the NFIP policy, and again, not private, but the NFIP policy's replacement cost on the dwelling and actual cash value depreciated on the contents, okay? And a lot of people are finding this out for the first time, was they're working with their adjuster, their flood adjuster, and you know, they've gone in and provided an inventory list of all the things they lost and the current replacement cost today to replace them. And then you submit that $104,000, or let's say, say $80,000, and of course they depreciate it down to, you know, maybe 50. Okay, so that's a wake-up call, but that's okay. You want to get that value to replace those items up. Okay, so there's more room for the depreciation is not as big a hit. So I would encourage you to get those numbers up.
So we shouldn't be value shopping. We should be shopping for real replacement
Full
value.
retail. Yep, absolutely.
know.
No sales, no value. Get those amounts up. The other thing that's interesting is all the appliances with flood are deemed to be deemed to be built in and part of the dwelling, except the washer and dryer. They're typically considered to be contents. Okay, so when you're working with that, you'll understand. You know, that's where you want to be, and you've got more room on the dwelling side up to 250. So that's kind of a good thing.
No, it's a great thing, and it was a surprise to me. I didn't know that. So we said we were going to get really, really basic, and this is going to sound like a really basic question, but we also don't know what the people in the room don't know. So the value of documentation with things like photos and receipts. Can you guys talk about that and why it's so important and what difference it can make in the claims process?
Yeah, I mean, the photos are everything. So, you know, when they first came in our house and I live in Reddington, I had a organization connected with Accentria who came in a few days right away and started pulling out and drying out. But before they did that, they took pictures of everything, okay? Because the adjuster told me, I want to see what your place looked like the day before Helene hit. I need to see that. So we had to go back into our, you know, your photos and see other pictures too. You just have to find them because I didn't know, you know, we didn't take, you know, we took pictures the day it happened. They're taking them damaged, but the adjuster said it would really be helpful and beneficial to you if you could find me, show me as much as you can what things look like the day before the storm. And the adjuster told me, inflate everything, okay? They want you to get paid more. They're not fighting you to, and just have that, you know, just know that. You have a discussion with your adjuster. He spent about 2 hours at our home measuring and looking at everything, you know, and now he's gone and he's waiting for information from us. So that's okay. We're going to get there. But you know, just be, you know, he may get a bill from me or an estimate that you know, it's going to cost me $60,000 to put a lot of this stuff back. I may be able to do it for 30, but that's okay. Okay, you're not lying. You're just saying here's my quote. If they accept it, fine. Okay,
I mean, on the basics on this, just think from a litigation standpoint, photos are worth 1,000 words, right? So you just need to be, well, you know that this person's trying to work with you. In the event that you are going to need to go to litigation, the attorney you are working with will love you if you have documentation of everything that's happened. Oral contracts, as good as the paper they're written on, and now I have photos that are worth 1,000 words, you better believe I am happier to take that case as a litigation attorney than somebody just saying, oh yeah, but we didn't take the photos. I'm gonna tell you, like, your chances, we're gonna be settling pretty early in that situation, or just tell you to take whatever they're giving you.
And one thing that a neighbor ran into, exactly what you said before the storm, and we talk about taking pictures of what stuff looks like. We're going to hit later with Mike Twitty, the after, both his organization, and then if you get an appraiser trying to do an appraisal of the value of the structure before the storm, they're only as good as the pictures. And so one of my neighbors had remodeled their house. I know it, they did permitted work, and her appraisal did not come back well. And I said, what pictures? And she's like, I really didn't have any. Now, I don't know who remodels their house and doesn't take pictures, but it was like, it really was literally the difference between 238 a square foot and 298 a square foot. So calculate it out. And so she's the person having a problem where her insurance wants to pay her more than she can carry, because the house was in good shape, but she couldn't prove that.
I talked to some people today that unfortunately, obviously they flooded, and everything, all their documentation was in paper and photograph, hard copies. Nothing digital, and they had remodeled their house and they had thrown everything out because it was all wet.
Wow.
So we're trying to do a building value reconsideration, flying blind, so to speak, so.
Talk to your agent. I tell all of my clients, if you want to do an inventory, have your kids, they all have cell phones, have them go room to room. I'll keep it in my system. You don't have to keep it in yours. Go room by room, send it to me. I'll attach it to your file. It's there forever.
That's awesome. Okay, so again, we're trying to get through a tremendous amount of information. One of the things that I learned actually with Hurricane Irma, not this one because I wasn't dumb enough to get myself in this situation again, was there's an umpire stage with insurance companies that if you reach, you're toast. They tell you it's a person who is neutral, Switzerland, but they hire the person. And that's a really important thing. Well, it was heritage, so who knows whether that's a real thing for everybody else or not. But that was something that I thought was really important to share with you guys, is don't get to the point to where you get to that umpire stage, because you're not going to win at that point. You need a David before you get to that point.
But the heritage is private and not flood.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I'm talking about homeowners.
You do
Yeah.
not need a me. I am a transaction attorney at this point, so please do not come to me with your insurance claims. I want to be very clear. I will help you get
Sorry,
somebody,
you need an
but
attorney
do not
at
come to
that
me.
point. Or a public adjuster, or somebody besides getting to that umpire stage. So Cindy, normally we have only 60 days in circumstances like what we have been through, but FEMA's extended for Pinellas County residents to 120 days, which the reason we shoved this event into December right before Christmas is because that 120 days is about to pass. So what do we know that we have to have done before that 120-day mark, which is January 26th, I believe?
So again, for those of us that went through it, 60 days went like that. And there was no way that I had my inventory done and all that stuff complete. But technically, by FEMA and by your insurance claim, you have 60 days to do that. So it's not an automatic, but FEMA did extend it to 120 days. But we still are on a clock. So understand, I don't know, FEMA must like 60, because same when we get to the substantial damage, you got 60 days to appeal, 60 days. So, but the key here is for people or if you're somebody who's, a little overwhelmed, ask for help, because we really do need to get that in and done. So, so that we did get an extension, but it is something that it's to our advantage to obviously, otherwise they're going to make assumptions on what they have, so it's important.
Is it only for the inventory that you have to have in by the end of January?
I don't know that that's a firm. I don't know that that's firm. I
Okay.
think there might be a little leeway
So FEMA, you're going to hear a lot of deadlines going through. They're more or less trying to set response times. So I came from foreclosure background, and they stop foreclosures for 90 days. And then they will go ahead and tell you at that point, if you've made your disaster declaration and you've told them that you've had damage, they kick it further each time. But they keep telling you it's 90 days for that one. 60 days is one of their other favorites. They're not quite the IRS with their deadlines, okay? So if you go talk to the American Bar Associations, they have a disaster relief with their Young Lawyers Division. They can walk you guys through some of this aspect, especially if you are in one of those means-tested areas for free pro bono work. But they have clinics on this that they can help with the insurance timelines. But more or less, FEMA just doesn't keep things extended for forever, okay? So there will be a time period where you will have to have made your claim for the insurance aspects, all that. And then when we get to the substantial damage, which is going to be Mike Twitty's time to shine, I'm here for it, you're going to hear other deadlines. So just keep in mind, the basic concept here is that you need to know there is not just some unlimited time period for you to make your claims. There's a statute of limitations in the state of Florida as well for making these claims. So all of that matters. Be on top of it, but maybe don't freak out that much, okay?
Great, thank you. So I've heard a lot of people talk about that they are afraid to accept the check, which Cindy has alluded to a couple of times, without knowing what the damage is going to be. And I think particularly with NFIP, if you accept and sign that check, is that it? Are you done? Or is there an opportunity to go back and say, hey, this is going to cost me more than you said it was going to cost me, or more than what I accepted?
You mean like, can you get more?
Is it
Is
a
that
done
what
deal once you cash the check?
It's not, no. I
Okay.
mean, I have several clients that have already cashed their first 2 checks.
Right, and there's always room for supplemental claims. It's never closed.
Okay, great. That's wonderful news. Is everything that a person, this is a rumor I've been hearing, everything that a person claims on their insurance going to be reported to the building department, therefore exposing them to being over the 50% rule?
I'm not aware of that at all.
No.
No.
Great.
There's just no connection between FEMA and NFI, your flood proceeds. There's just not.
They barely talk to you. They're not talking to anybody else.
That's why we're having this event. Hopefully we're
When you,
dispelling all the scary things.
when you fill out your permit, it says, be sure that it syncs with your insurance claim. There is, so again, I would not live my life believing that is not true.
Which jurisdiction
Which jurisdiction?
has that on there? I haven't seen that on other jurisdictions.
Madeira Beach does, absolutely it does, and they told me, be sure it matches. And even though the government in 1974 passed the Privacy Act of not being able to give, right? Like cities sign a disclosure, and everybody that applies for FEMA aid, it goes to the city. So all of those things, it's all FEMA. It's FEMA's money on the front, FEMA's money on the back, and the city in the middle.
Well, Madeira's under that consent order. They're in trouble. They owe, I don't remember how much they owe FEMA right now. Yeah. That might be why that's in there, because I haven't seen that with,
Right.
right, yeah, exactly. There were property owners not building the code and they weren't enforcing properly.
And I know a lot of insureds already that have been direct deposited $250,000 from their flood premium, and they're doing nothing with the house. They're walking. So they're taking the money. And, I had one adjuster say, look, whatever you're overpaid, it's considered helping to reimburse the equity that you're going to lose in this whole situation.
And
So,
yeah, there's a couple other things on this. FEMA has multiple hats throughout this process. As long as you understand that FEMA's disaster assistance is different than them with the NFIP, because they are an administrator with the NFIP program. But let me just tell you that left and right hand are not talking as is accurate, okay? So they're not talking to each other on that aspect. If you see the people on the ground walking around that have FEMA shirts on, please go talk to them, because you're getting FaceTime with the disaster assistance guys. That's not the NFIP. The NFIP guys rarely are walking around. They're usually using the adjusters to go deal with that end, right? So please don't be scared of the FEMA aspect on that. I can't guarantee that they're going to get you help, but they can at least get you to where you need to be possibly on disaster assistance. But what we're dealing with here where are they going to report the NFIP aspect? Know that cities have been under restrictions previously, and now we're seeing it as a result of Hurricane Ian down south, that some of them are going to be dinged with the NFIP. So basically, the NFIP gives you discounted flood insurance, essentially. And if you're not eligible for that as a city, a municipality, you've cost millions of dollars possibly to the municipality. So they have to watch out for how many people they've allowed to do this. When we talk about the FEMA 50% rule, I'll elaborate a little bit more, but just know the FEMA 50% rule is not just as a result of storms. It's actually in place for before storms to make sure we don't build up too heavily in areas that are flood prone without getting up to code. So if you keep that in the back of your mind, one side of FEMA trying to help, the disaster assistance guys. The other side of FEMA that's administering the NFIP may not be actually trying to help you as a homeowner, but they're trying to help the community be more resilient.
That's right.
That's your concepts at that point.
It's a great way to look at it. Definitely makes it hurt a little bit less, right?
Yeah, so getting back to Cindy's dilemma in Madeira Beach, because all the other jurisdictions I'm aware of, you can put these things in their own lane. If you're dealing with value, 50% value in your repairs, that's one lane. Deal with your contractor. Don't use your adjuster numbers for that. Use a contractor for your repair, and then deal with your insurance in the other lane. Don't let those two cross over.
Valuable, super valuable. All right, I think we're moving into the Mike Twitty stage here.
I just thought I finished.
So what should a person do if they have not received their substantial damage letter yet?
Well, that's not my wheelhouse, but my understanding is they need to still be waiting.
She doesn't show up, so we're asking you.
And it depends, the jurisdictions are releasing those letters and sending them out at all different paces. I just read something today that there are more resources coming down from the state to help particularly the small municipalities speed that process along. I just want to let people know too, if you get an SD letter, that's not the end of the line. I did hear that that's not the case in one jurisdiction, but they're trying to work that out, and I think that was Reddington Shores. I think they have Safe Built in as a contract building inspector, and they are drawing on a hard line in the sand on their SD letter. So I don't know where that's going to play out, but I can tell you the other jurisdictions, and especially the county, is looking at that as just a first high pass, because it was a lot of data. We're having to use flood inundation and water depth data. We've got LIDAR information, so we know what at grade is. We know generally what water depths were, whether they got in houses or not during the inspection process. So they had a pretty good feel and could run those data points through the substantial damage estimator tool. That's a software package provided by FEMA. Some of our data goes in, but I don't want to get in the weeds on how it exactly works, but I'll assure you the numbers that go in that come from us help on the repair side, because they're using our numbers against our values, our adjusted base costs. So you're using apples and apples on how it lines up. You're not using contractor costs to repair compared against our FEMA 50% numbers. So it is apples and apples in the estimator as it runs through the system. I want to encourage people, so if they do get that SD letter, just immediately go on, make sure you have your repair estimates, because I'm here to, I've heard several, even in my own neighborhood, where they only had several inches of water, but they got an SD letter. And it was because the water marks were a lot higher on some of the buildings outside. The water didn't get in, and they need to just go ahead, submit for what they call a reassessment. That's kind of your next step after the SD, at least within the county. And then even if you don't get satisfaction there, you still have a special magistrate appeal process. Yes, so in many cases, you might not need the additional appraisal. They need to look at that, look at what their number is on the FEMA letter on our website, see where that matches up. And then if that doesn't, they can always do an additional free relook with us. We have a new process we started calling it called a building value reconsideration. So they can submit that through our website, especially if they've done work in recent years that we're not aware of. So a lot of longtime homeowners, they've done stuff, didn't really require a permit. They've updated the inside of those homes, or we don't go inside, so we don't necessarily know that. If they provide photo documentation, contractor invoices, those types of things within recent years, we're able to relook at that. We've got a panel of directors that review those several times a week together and make those calls to adjust effective ages and adjust quality and condition calls. So that gives us an opportunity to move that number, and if we do, and right now I'll tell you that the ones that have come in, better than 90% have had some value movement in a good direction. So encourage people to take advantage of that. That's another free look at that process. If you're close, it certainly is worthwhile to try. If you're a long ways away, or you had a ton of water in your home, I'm just gonna tell you right now, get an ACV appraisal, an actual cash value appraisal, because that's gonna be your best way to potentially have a chance to repair.
Yeah, it made a significant difference for me. We had an actual cash value done, and it was over what our coverage was. So as long as you're over what your coverage is, then you can get the maximum coverage.
Just in the document, we put 3 names of the person that we've used that actually
Yeah.
did the cost appraisals, because the first time I did it was with an appraiser that didn't really do the right thing, and the city wouldn't accept it, and I just wasted money and frustration. So just realize those were 3 names of people that we'd all used successfully as options that, that's the kind of the best way. Find people that the city's accepted their stuff and that they meet the checklist and guidelines, but it's all in there.
So just back to, just really quickly, because I can use my neighborhood as an example. Some of us have gotten our SD letters, some of us have not. Like, is the only way to get it USPS, the most reliable form of
As far as I understand, yes.
Okay.
Reddington's, I think Reddington Shores too, but I've heard they will be sending it out in the mail and they have your email address, they're gonna email you too,
Okay.
so.
So every municipality is different. So I'm unincorporated, and everyone's waiting on the mail.
Everybody is different,
Right,
Yeah.
right. They can all be slightly
Okay.
different.
Okay.
– 60 days.
That one's a hard one. Make sure you're on that.
Okay, but here is the hard one question. It's 60 days. However, places like currently the county don't, well, let me back up. Indian Rocks Beach has an email that you send it to, but there's no return receipt, there's no process, so you've now put it. How can you prove you turned it in, and what are your options? Like, you rattled off some stuff, but it could sit there for 60 days and then someone say, hey, guess what, you missed the 60 days, but
So depending on each municipality, again, we can't paint with a broad stroke of how each one of them is going to do this, but they will have how to respond. Document how you are responding. If you are being told to respond by mail, there's by statute, typically a 5-day mailbox rule that comes in. But most at this point, I don't know if the county is going to be doing this as by mail. Most of them will have a resource for you to email. This is always a blast because email has delivery receipt. As an attorney, I use that all the time. Last but not least, one of the best ways you're doing this, if you are using USPS, is to ensure that you do certified mail. Okay, so whenever I send anything via notice for my legal documentation, I do certified mail so that I get a receipt from them and nobody can sit there and say, oh, we never got it. I can then go to court, because again, you need to be doing everything as if you are about to be set up for trial. You are creating my little trial binder for me or whoever the attorney is going to be. So please, delivery, read receipt for emails. If it is a form that you will go to a website, you will then print out or take a screenshot of the little thing that says it's been submitted. Like, you'll get to another page on these websites. It'll say submitted. Take a screenshot. Most of these websites will also have a spot for you to put in your email for the receipt confirmation at that point. If it is going to be mailed though, please certified mail to them, and please don't wait till the last day on that end. Last but not least, most people are probably, especially elected officials, not gonna really like me for this one, but blow up the people that, like, call them all the time. Just blow up their phones. Because if you've sent it in, just continue calling, because the squeaky wheel gets the oil in these situations. I can't begin to explain how being an intern at any representative's office will tell you the person that calls 15 times a day, suddenly they just want to get rid of you. And they're going to do that. I do it with my law office too. If you call me 15 times a day, suddenly you're going to be at the top of my priority list, so you stop bothering my poor paralegal who's answering the phone. Same concept with everything on that. Yeah. So I know we're being recorded on that, and I hesitate to do it, but yeah.
I will just say, St. Pete Beach this week released a request form to request more time. So I think some of the cities, because the concern is, as we talked about, they're overworked. And so that's just one more thing they're having to process through. They don't even have SDs through. So I think they're realizing that there might be. So again, I think check with your city or your municipality quickly and figure that out, like just they're constantly updating.
And a question for the panel. I would imagine the 60 days is firm too if you want to file a claim for ICC, if you did get an SD letter. So that's another one that would likely be a firm one.
Well, and
Explain that in English.
For if you received an SD letter and you do want to knock your home down and rebuild, increased cost of compliance, you can file a claim for that, and it's additional $30,000. Now, you still can't exceed the max of $250. It's all inclusive. It's rolled up in there, so you can't put it on top if you got a full $250. But it's baked inside of that.
So it counts in your 50% to elevate the house?
No.
Oh,
No, I'm saying that's an additional claim you can submit for, an additional $30,000 to help with the rebuild or the elevation.
okay,
But you have to have a substantial damage letter in
okay.
order to get it. Yes.
David, you're chomping at the bit.
Yeah, so basically that is, if you have, any sort of compliance where you're gonna have to put in, say, AC or any sort of elevation at that point to be up to code for what you're gonna be doing as well, that is not through the NFIP program, FEMA. The ICC is actually through disaster assistance claim aspects, okay? And quite frankly, the ICC program could even be state level at this point, because they create a program as well, which I believe you and I were talking about, we'll get to later. It's confusing where you need to make the claims, so now you know why there's a cottage industry of attorneys and adjusters that help you walk through this. Again, not me.
It's intentionally nebulous for that reason, probably. It's part of the 250. Your 250 is your ultimate max. Correct me if I'm wrong, the insurance. All right.
Okay.
We need to repeat questions so people online and the recording can hear.
Yeah, I think she was basically asking what's the turnaround time if she received an SD letter and files for that reassessment process, which is the first step. I honestly can't answer that right now. I don't know what their turnaround. It's probably a matter of, do you know?
I can tell you from previous storms, it's usually about a 90-day turnaround is when you can start to expect some answers, because they just got way overwhelmed. So I will say the municipalities are going to try to get a much faster turnaround, and I'm sure he can do it, but
I think the county's
yeah.
going to be a lot faster.
Yeah.
I think I would say, I'm just guessing, but I'm saying a matter of weeks. 2 to 3 weeks is what a little bird just told me. Well, it's essentially through the same department. So if they approve it, I would think they would be able to release the permit right away then.
Okay, back to, oh, I'm sorry. I can't see, these are all in my way. I can't see Nicole. I have to like stand on my tippy toes.
Thank you. I'm an engineer, not a realtor or an adjuster, but just from everybody speaking here, you're all talking about photographs. What's your opinion if a walkthrough video of each room with a verbal description? Would that work, or are you strictly talking about photographs?
I would prefer, this is coming from the attorney's standpoint on this, it is much easier for me to submit for evidence in a trial, or a photography, because basically what's gonna happen is I have rules of evidence that I have to prove the photo in order for things to be submitted before a judge or a jury. Videos take a little bit more because they can be edited. So it's tough on the editing aspect. Photographs are much easier for me as a rule of evidence anyway, because it's they can be edited, but we can look at the metadata in one little standpoint versus if you do a video, it's gonna take me a little bit more on
That's
the
what I was
forensic
just gonna
side.
tell you on my contents. I had video and I had photos. All the photos, they had the metadata of the date and time when it was done. I went in and I took snapshots of the video when I realized I didn't have the same photo because I thought I was doing video. And I can tell they don't like it as much. Like I can just tell it's just not the same.
Right, it's not as good. And we're taking photos through the BVR process, and some people have videos, and they're a lot harder to administer. You know, you can't upload them, you know,
Because they're too big.
they're too big, they're too much to manage. So we've had to actually triage those off to the side and take screenshots as we watch the video in order to even use those. So we would prefer photographs
Good to know.
or upload them. It depends on, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Photos for sure for insurance. I mean, videos are fine, but we're submitting photographs. So some of the carriers, it's an app. Some of the flood adjusting firms, it's an app that you're uploading the photos. There's not even a way to upload a video. So you can absolutely do a video. It might help you be like, oh, I forgot about this, I forgot about that, make it a little bit easier. You can certainly do both. But photos from a claims perspective and submitting claims, photos all day long.
Yep, go ahead, sir.
I was just gonna remind you, there's other sources of photographs other than your own. If your house has ever been listed for sale, there are photographs more
Yep.
than likely in the MLS.
Yeah.
They could be 10 years old. Yeah, it's not gonna show probably recent additions, but it is going to reflect a lot of features of the property. So MLS has a great historical archive. The other thing you might want to do in hurricane season, list your house for sale. And have it professionally photographed.
I love it.
Because the easiest cash value appraisals that I'm doing right now are either properties that were listed at the time of Helene or shortly, within the year prior.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Can you repeat that?
No, do you want me to repeat what he said?
Well, I can repeat it.
Okay.
So Frank just said that, again, you want to have those photos, so realize that MLS, if you've ever had your house recently for sale or in the period that your realtor and somebody can access that and get you access, and there's usually, again, very attractive looking photos. So same thing if it's a short-term rental, like those people have good pictures of what was in there. And so don't overlook that. And then he said, it's also a great time that you could list it before you got good pictures, we're ready to go. So that was tongue in cheek.
I'll be watching for that giant spike in listings right before hurricane season.
All right, another rumor.
And then values are going to crash because there's so much supply.
Another rumor. If you get a substantial damage letter, does that mean you automatically get $250,000 from NFIP? No. Okay.
The basics on that, not everybody's structure value is even close to $250,000 at that point. So your max would be completely unrelated to the substantial damage. Like that's just not gonna flow.
Okay.
This was St. Pete Beach? Right, and this was within the weeks after the storm, right? Yeah, yeah. So they were looking for watermarks, they were looking for, predominantly. A lot of the substantial damage inspectors, at least the better ones, in my opinion, have been going to the door and knocking on the door to see if anybody's around. Sometimes there, at least been somebody around, you can get inside, you can actually get true water, water depths from the inside as opposed to from the outside. It's a different perspective. And that's what, when we had we had a small portion of our staff helping out the building department at the county with that effort, and we were really pushing on that to get that. But the ones that are doing it from the curb, you got to get a little closer than that, in my opinion. But there's a lot of contractors out there helping with the effort, so it's a bit of a mixed bag. But they're looking for those water depths. Yes.
Yeah, there was a subcontractor like Tidal Basin and stuff.
Yes.
I think the thing to realize is that there were people that did the watermarks and people that took pictures of each neighborhood. And so the way I've said it to my clients, especially for unpermitted work, is it's going to be on you to prove you didn't have flooding, because if you go like to Pinellas County, one of my clients did, he lives in Indian Rocks Beach, and pulled it up. They're showing the data of what they think the water line was on the outside and extrapolating to the inside and what was there. So if you were to say, I didn't pull a permit and my house didn't flood, you need to prove it, because they're like, why is all your kitchen cabinets in the front yard? So there was a data gathering period. It's not perfect. And that's why there's still this opportunity to appeal, because there's also erroneous information. But I think that it was, your question was, is there a target but I really think that, I don't think there's a target.
No.
But I think that there was because of some of the things in Ian, they contracted with people to capture that data before it's gone, and then clean it up as we go through, is the best way I would say.
Oh, yeah, I mean, some homeowners were out there washing watermarks off, before the sun came up, but.
And one more for people that may or may not know in Kelly's comment is historic homes can, if they comply, there's a way that the 50% rule applies to them differently. So that was the comment, that if you're in a historic home doing that, there's some waivers.
There's
in
an
that.
entire, for FEMA's rules, they have an entire exception, different rules set up for historic designations. So, and we're talking a lot of homes, but that's also commercial aspects too. So FEMA's aspects there, they have, it's I think 174-page desk manual that I have for these things. And there's an entire section dedicated to historic aspects. So as with everything, the answer is always going to be, it depends again. And we have to look at the unique circumstances there. But yeah, and also when it goes to the unpermitted work, let me just tell you that the municipalities and the county, even you and I, we know who flooded. We know the neighborhoods that are going to be problematic. And if you're in one of those neighborhoods and you're trying to say, hey, I didn't need to pull a permit or anything like that, like, it's going to be pretty obvious. And as real estate agents, you guys should absolutely be aware of who flooded, because in 6 to 9 months, those houses are going to be on the market. And if you're representing a buyer and you don't see a permit record, that should be a huge red flag for what's going on. So I know we're being recorded, but Shore Acres knows they're kind of in that spot. But like, if you're looking at Shore Acres and they don't have a permit for anything, you got a problem, right? So as agents, please be careful in what you're doing on that end in 6 to 9 months when a lot of those things hit the market.
Yeah, and we're way, way, way far behind on where we're supposed to be, but that is something that we were going to talk about later in the
Just,
program.
and also real quick, when, in the Reddingtons, they were specifically not coming in, we don't need to come in, we don't need, and I'm coming, really? How are you going to see but they're looking for substantial in that broken windows, collapsed windows, garage doors, or if the house is moved off the foundation, those bigger things too, and the watermarks, of course. But they're walking around, and then
The debris in your yard.
Yep, and then they know the square footage of the house, so they're figuring, and if it's a 2-story house, it's going to be a little different deal than the
Right.
1-story. So, anyways.
And just so you know, in that substantial damage estimator tool, that FEMA tool, it has a breakdown of damage percentages by the structural components within different types of dwellings. So that's pre-baked in per FEMA. But then the damage percentages by those structural elements is determined by the inspectors. But there's a baseline that was set early on by water depth to have just a default gauge based on, different levels. So I like to use this example of, like, by default, if you're at, I think, under 2 feet, flooring is at like 50% is the damage percentage in that scale. But if you had terrazzo floors, you're gonna clean them and seal them, and you're done, and maybe it's 5%. So that's why it's important a lot of times for them to be able to see, because then they can adjust those actual damage factors.
Well, my understanding is that tool is available online. I actually sent it out to everyone that's on the panel. And that you can go in and say, this person said, I have a stick house, but I have a cinder block house. And you can make them look at what the actuals are as opposed to somebody that's walking down the sidewalk and making
Well,
notes.
you can, but it won't have the same numbers in it. It won't have the same inputs going in with the damage percentages and the base costs that if you just pull down that software, because you have to put some inputs in. So you won't necessarily have the same ones.
But I guess what I'm asking is, can you go in and say, this is inaccurate? I don't live in a stick house, or my air conditioning wasn't damaged, or?
Well, absolutely. That's part of the reassessment process. So if you get an SD letter, that's exactly what that's for, is to come in and say, hey, I didn't have any damage here. You had me at 18 inches over my outlets. I had it just above the baseboards. Here's some photos. Here's, some other documentation. Here's my repair costs.
Great.
So that's exactly what that process is for. And I encourage anybody that gets an SD to go through that process.
Wonderful, thank you. Moving on to look-back periods. Cindy, do you want to talk about those? Because they're different for every municipality, and most people don't even know what they are.
So I just want to talk real briefly, because I know we've got a lot to cover tonight, that prior to the new risk rating 2.0, there was the community rating system discount, and the idea was to encourage cities to do things that were minimizing flooding. And look-back periods were one of those things that added to the discount. But if any of you live in a flood zone and you look at your flood policy, I don't care where you are, like whether you're in this Pinellas County unincorporated at 40% or Madeira Beach at 15%, you're getting dollars, you're getting baby dollars. So I pay $7,700 in a town that is 15%, and I get $11. So the policy was in place prior when there was a really big payoff, and it was done for all the right reasons. But when they revamped pricing, that discount went away, but cities had not yet fully relooked at that and understand the impact to resiliency. We've been having conversations over the last 2 years, because after Hurricane Ian, we said, what did you learn? And what they said was that Cape Coral and Fort Myers, they took all the things you'd done to your house for 5 years, and you only had whatever was left to make repairs. So not only was it used up, but the values were very different 5 years ago of what your 50% would be to today, versus Sarasota Manatee had 1 year. So a perfect example would be a neighbor in Largo, a family member in Largo whose parents had a home that 5 years ago, the 50% was $100,000. That same house not doing anything, the 50% would have been $160,000 if it went today. But they put a new water heater in 4 years ago, so they were pegged to $100,000. And so now they had 4 inches of water. And when you start doing kitchen cabinets and some other stuff, they were 80 years old. For 4 inches of water, they were going to lose their home. So Rep. Cheney is put in the state legislature making this aware last year. They didn't do policy, but they did a study which recently came back, which said look-back periods, if they were to lower them and make our neighborhoods more resilient, that they would, on average, cost homeowners $36 more. Most of us would say, you can have my $36, let me fix my house and come home, now that we understand. So I know there'll be some stuff coming. The thing that saved everybody right now was that almost every city rolled it back. Largo, Dunedin, St. Pete Beach has a 5-year look back. Luckily, thanks to Tom Shelley here, Bel Air Bluffs rolled theirs back. Bel Air Beach rolled theirs back before the storm. So we're seeing the impact, and I think as sad as it is, and I wish everybody would have figured it out before, I think people are seeing that helping people get back home and that resiliency is something we should all relook at. And I think there'll be legislation, so I would say as you hear more about it, to make that awareness. But I'll also tell you, the study showed the longer the look back, the less value of the property, right? 5 years, it said on average, and that's when people didn't even know. How many people even who have ever heard of a look back or before the storm? Those homes already were 5.7% less. So on a $400,000 home, you know, look at what kind of cost value your impact compared. So those are things we have to look at, but most importantly, it's when you're buying a house, if you're in a 5-year look back, you need to look at what they've spent and what's left. I was in a listing appointment today in Dunedin, so that's a really big thing. They've done a lot of renovation, looks great. The next person better pray nothing happens because they've used it up.
Yeah.
So we've learned a lot, sometimes the hard way, but I think you're going to see some improvements, and the studies bore out that I think that it's what we're saving is no longer there. It's literally, I haven't seen one over $100 in any high-risk area. The average was $36. I think most people going through this would say to someone, that is a very high price to pay for the ability to lose my house. So it would matter more, and I'd talk about it more if the cities hadn't waived it. But every city that I know of, you tell me differently, they waived it, and that for this moment, they're doing substantial damage. Either 1 year or open permits is kind of counting
Open permits
again.
has been getting a lot of people. If you had an open permit at the time, that's going to get counted in towards your 50% rule. There's two aspects to the 50% rule that we brought up earlier, and this is where the look back period really got a lot of people, is the substantial improvement. So when I used to teach a waterfront class, so most of you being here, I'm assuming you're in a special flood hazard area. If you are in flood zone X, the last hour and a half has probably been just pedantic, because a lot of the look back period aspect, the FEMA 50% rule, doesn't necessarily really apply to you. Again, might be some unique circumstances that I don't know about at this point, but you're pretty good. But if you're in a special flood hazard area, AE, flood zone A, anything like that, these are all things that matter. So that look back period, if you did not elevate above the base flood elevation, still matters for substantial improvement. And it will matter for the FEMA 50% substantial damage, except that, as Cindy has brought up, they've more or less kind of said, all right, open permits matter from previous, but we're taking a holistic view from the damage standpoint of this. So that's where we're at. But yeah, the look back periods were an issue. I used to have to coach new buyers, and definitely as real estate agents, if you see that there's been a lot of work done in the last couple of years, pay attention to, like, Largo is a 5-year look back period is the last I saw, so.
All right, so what is the process for reevaluation through your office, Mike? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, no, okay, so if you're residential, commercial, and your historic designation, the historic designation doesn't matter if you're residential or commercial, it's historic for that aspect. Yeah. Well, commercial aspects on this, so FEMA doesn't delineate, they still care, FEMA 50% rule will matter for commercial buildings. Yes.
So to start the building value reconsideration process, we had to give it an acronym, so it's called a BVR in our world. You can do it right on the homepage of our website. Right in our announcement section, you'll see a link that says request a building value reconsideration. We also have a storm damage information speed button on the left. You can hit that. It'll take you into the FAQs for all storm damage related Q&A, and the BVR is addressed in there too, which will jump you right to the BVR page. So there are a couple ways you can get there. It's a simple process to start that application. It's a form fill PDF right now. We're going to turn it into a interactive web form that's in process, but they just need to submit that via email along with some documentation, which is generally photographs. And if they've got maybe some contractor invoices from the last 24 months, that can be helpful.
Okay, great. What
Can I
about
su-
people?
Can I support Mike real quick on
Yeah.
this? Because let me tell you, I work throughout the area, not just in Pinellas County, and the process here in Pinellas County has been made so much smoother and easier by our property appraiser. So I just want to, as we're getting through this, that process was really great. And the fact that we even have FEMA letters available to us is just tremendously valuable for while I'm trying to coach somebody through a call and help them figure out where they're at. So just figured that was a great
I
opportunity to jump in
appreciate
on that one.
And I didn't even have to pay him.
No.
Thank you.
Huge kudos to Mike, and also I went through the process. So I had just done a $125,000 remodel permitted, and so I was able to send stuff in and get an adjustment. And so the process is, they asked for about 2 weeks turnaround, and I think that's what it was, just processing. But it was, but I will just say it was painless, just submitting it and then got back. But thank you, because you've really added to the transparency and made so many resources that we added in our group thing too, but it's helping people just understand the process.
I appreciate that. Oh, I would like to add this in while we're on the topic of FEMA letters. Many people have run into the fact that condominiums and townhomes are not available via the FEMA letter right now. We are working on that process. We hope to have a sizable batch in the tens of thousands of condos that will start firing online by the end of the week. And then we'll follow suit with more as we have to go through and do some data, deep dive in some of our data and get some things coded differently, because we have a lot of parcels with multiple buildings on them, and condos are handled differently. It's by the structure, so it's the entire condominium building or the entire townhome building, not the unit. And when we do stuff for assessment purposes, it's by the unit. So that's how we've always tracked everything. So we have to go in and we're having to literally put building numbers on all these parcels. So it was 75,000 parcels we had to touch just for condos, just to get those right. So we're going through that process, so please bear with us, but I just want to let you know that's going to be popping out there soon.
That is awesome. That's great. All right, so we were supposed to take a bio break like 45 minutes ago, and we are not going to get through all of this, but I've also been told they're not going to throw us out, correct? Do we have to end at 7? We're good? Okay. That's what I was going to say. PDQ donated like 250 chicken tenders and all the sauces, and Pro put cookies and all kinds of things out, and nobody's gone over there and gotten any of them. So I don't want to take 250 chicken tenders home to the RV in the driveway. So I hope you guys will start eating those, but I would like, if it's okay with everyone, just to take a quick break so that I can, you got up and left the stage. I can't do that. So
My bladder can only take so much.
exactly. So, or I can leave you guys talking and turn it over to Cindy.
Can I quickly share something for everybody in this room? We have incredible technology. Every single thing you say is amplified, and they can hear it specifically in the recording. So as we take that break, just be aware, don't say bad things about anybody, because it's all, oh, yay. Okay, good. Never mind, it's off, so go at it. Yeah, still be nice to each other. Kindness is a plus.
All right, let's go ahead and get the panel back up here and. All right, we're going back, Mike. Where'd David go? David Ryder. It's up to you. We're like.
I think you might, he's got a lifting in the structural engineering whole. You won't give him a down.
We can certainly do that.
I would, I think you've had, the insurance is done.
Okay.
We beat that one dead horse. No, and put Suzanne, put those two on, put these guys on. Because nobody's had them anywhere.
Okay.
You guys come up. You guys come up. Talk about lifting. I think we got insurance covered. We'll move it on to lifting and building.
Well,
What? Where's that?
yeah. Where's Mike? Did he leave it? Oh, no, he's eating. You're not allowed to eat. Yep. He's actually who I'm waiting for. All right, so while we're waiting for Mike to finish his dinner, George, you want to talk a little bit about? We're just trying to get you guys as much time with these experts as we can. Trust me, my husband just said, well, I guess we have to tell the dogs we lied. We said we'd be done at 7, right? Oh, okay, Mike's back up here, so we're good. So kind of walk us through step by step what a person should do once they receive their substantial damage letter if they are deemed substantially damaged.
All right, well, thank you.
George, wait, you're gonna ask next. You're gonna be one of the options of substantial damage. Let's start the prayer.
Right.
Yeah, so that first step, if you get that letter, is to get your contractor cost estimates together. And go on, if it's the Pinellas County, I'm just going to use unincorporated Pinellas County for an example, go on that your jurisdiction's website. They should have an option to apply for that reassessment process and upload that documentation. Can also include an actual cash value appraisal if you have that, or you may have reached back out to us for that building value reconsideration. So if we've done that, that could be submitted as well to let them know. And they can obviously the building official can always go verify that on our website after the fact as well, but they could print that out, submit that, and upload that along with that in that process.
And then they're good to go.
Well, it's got to be approved.
Right.
So, but it's going to go through the review at that other end, but that's all they have to do.
Can I ask one question about that?
Yeah.
If you have a cost appraisal that meets the checklist, that's valid, is there any mechanism in that approval process that, like in Madeira, if you have that, they're telling us, we have what we need, we comply, move forward. I don't know, I'm just curious in the reevaluation process, what else are people reevaluating if you have that, one of those two FEMA options to determine the 50% limit?
Well, they're gonna look at the cost estimate to see if it matches up with what the proposed scope of work is. You know, because now there's likely going to be photographs showing the inside, how extensive it actually is to repair. Make sure that cost estimate looks reasonable to repair for that scope of work.
if you think about it, there is what, I think they said 10,000 homes in St. Pete alone that got damaged, right? If they tried to do every one of these inside, it would take us forever. So to get those substantial damage letters out timely, they have their process of people walking around doing that aspect. This is the opportunity then to fight what they did and get more information at that aspect. So you're not only going to try for the appraisal aspect, but you're also going to be trying to say, hey, the damage wasn't as bad either at that point. So that's where we're at.
So this one's going to sound silly. I know there's definitely people who feel guilty about this, but what is the process if you are not deemed substantially damaged? Then what?
Pull a permit.
Pull a permit. That's it. There's no other. Okay. All right. That's great. Makes no sense. Half the people on my street are, and half the people are not. And we're all on the same street with the same issues. So it makes no sense. And the people who are not feel really guilty about the people who are. It's interesting. Okay, so let's talk about the increased cost of compliance. We have George up here. He is an expert on elevating the homes and what the options are there. So George, now it's your turn to talk.
Well, I'm not an expert on elevating a home. I'm a geotechnical engineer and have dealt with this for 53 years now. But you can have several options. If you were flooded, what everybody seems to be talking about is repairing the home, not lifting or raising the home to either not be flooded the next time or get out of the flood zone, or is it worth doing that as opposed to reconstruction? So substantial structural damage from a cost standpoint, anything can be fixed from the engineering aspect. It's the cost of doing it. There's two ways of raising a home if we're getting into that. You can leave the existing home where the first floor, the lower level, and add a second floor above it, make the first floor a non-living area, and the second becomes your above the floodplain. The other way, there are mechanisms and methods of taking that existing home and actually jacking it up, putting new supports, putting whether it's going to be mini pile, piers on existing foundations, things like that, that you could get that home up. To me, that's reconstruction or raising. But sometimes that's going to take a lot more effort than you think. Some of the things that I wrote down a little earlier, let me get my glasses real quick. Otherwise, I used to see, but not anymore. Okay, I think you do, even if somebody determines you have substantial structural damage or not, you still need to get a structural inspection of the existing home, not just how high the floodwater came, how much drywall it damaged and so forth, but is that home capable of being raised if that's what you want to do with it? Does it have sufficient reinforcing bars at corners and windows and openings? Because when you get into the engineering aspect, I had mentioned this, if you're taking an existing home and you're going to build a second floor on it, the lateral loads against that structure from the ground standpoint are not going to be so bad. But if you take that and then they are what they are, but if you put that up on pillars, now you've got a shoebox that's resting on pegs, and the wind push is going to cause a lot of stress that you didn't have at ground level. So from my aspect, no matter what you want to do with it, first find out, is your home capable of being raised, renovated, or is reconstruction your best option?
And who do we find that out from?
Structural engineering firms can handle the, pardon me? I'm sorry. There it is. I can hear it now. Okay. I'm part of, after 53 years, a new merged with a company that has both structural engineers, geotechnical engineers. I'm not going to get into that, but find a competent structural engineer that can inspect the home, and not from the soil standpoint, but say this home is capable of being raised or If you're going to build a second floor, look at an architect and engineer, because you're going to have to meet open walls, non-living area standards on the lower level. So that may mean take out a lot of walls that may be bearing walls and open it up to breakaway walls and so forth. So look at it from that aspect. From my end of it, from the soils end, are the existing foundations capable of supporting additional load from a second story or a different configuration, point loads, pile or columns of transferring the loads to the soil where it originally was a continuous strip footer and a uniform distribution. So you're going to get soil borings at some standpoint. That's me. But it's just.
And we'll add make sure your information's in our thing, so
Well,
you'll be
there's-
able to, there'll be,
there's
I mean, there's
others
others,
too,
but
but
again.
We'd be happy to help if we could. And again, soil profiles beneath the property in determining whether the existing foundations are meeting the soil bearing capacity or are deficient and you need some type of additional support. There's a lot of companies out there trying to sell ways and means of raising a home. But if you don't know what you're pushing into, you don't know if it's a long-term solution. It's just an expensive, pretty solution that 5 years from now, you're going to have problems. And can you find that contractor or not? So permitting is important, but there is some data, and most municipalities that I'm aware of will require some type of a soils investigation to go with anything more than renovation or cosmetic repair of the house.
Some sort of compression testing or?
Yep. Standard penetration borings, cone penetrometer, something to tell you the bearing capacity. Have they figured the existing footers and what the loads, those existing foundations could be there from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 50 years. The soils have equalized to the imposed load of what the house is now. You change that, you're going to change the dynamic of what that foundation is going to do to the soil. And it sounds like a lot of technical BS, but if you want to do it and you want to get a new house or a raised house, go the right way about it and then go from there. And I did have a lot of times, and I'm going to say this, and I don't know, are the contractors in the room? Maybe not. If you're going to go to some type of supplemental support for an existing house, these exotic means of lifting and providing supplemental support usually cost about 3 times what a conventional, well-tried and true treated timber pile foundation or auger cast concrete or even pre-stressed concrete. I design all of them, but you go to mini pile, you go to some type of segmented sections that are pushed into the ground and then a rebar goes through the center and so forth. All of those things sound good, but they're going to be much, much more costly. And I believe they would all figure into the 50% rule when you're looking at improvement.
Only if you don't go above the.
BFE,
Yeah,
right.
if you go above the base flood elevation, if you go above base flood elevation, you don't have to worry about 50% rule anymore at that point.
Well, you're
Yeah,
getting it.
yeah, you got to get it up
Yeah.
there. So that cost would not go towards it. There's a FEMA rule that if for some reason, I don't know why anybody would do this, you can elevate the house but not be above the base flood elevation, it's going to count. Please don't ever do that. If you're
Yeah, no,
elevating your
no,
house and paying
yeah.
$300,000,
Why would you do that?
Because you've done
please
nothing.
get it above the base flood elevation.
Your
I'm begging
insurance
you.
is still going to be 25 or 50% more than if you went that extra 2 feet and got it up where it needs to be.
Have you seen a certain vintage of home, let's take a 60s block ranch, plaster walls, they're pretty solidly built, that is a better fit for the abandonment of the lower level and building on top?
I would say in that regard, yes, a CMU house is going to be much better than a frame house, obviously.
Mhm.
The shear walls, which are going to take the place of giving it lateral resistance once you open it up to breakaway walls, are going to be there or can be fabricated instead of some inside framed non-load-bearing partition walls. You change them into even 4-inch masonry walls or 8-inch, but you can configure fairly easily. So a CMU house is much easier to facilitate into a modification and adding a second floor.
What's a CMU?
Concrete masonry unit.
Thank you.
I'm
We're not
sorry.
all in the business.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No. So many of you have, yes, give me 2 seconds. Many of you have said, God, it's so great to have Mike Twitty here. And we do plan to have a second session in January, I believe. We still have so many pages of questions. We have a whole entire panel of contractors that we're supposed to get to speak tonight, but we're also losing people. So I want to skip a lot of what we were going to talk about and go to Mike, because we don't know if he's coming back in January or not. We might have pissed him off, so. So let's talk about the property tax thing, and I can use myself as an example, because I was super proud of myself. Right after the storms, I saw that they were going to give us rebates, and I went on, I filled out my paperwork, and I was like, okay, check that off the list, that's done. And you guys sent it back and said, you don't even know how long you're going to be out of the home yet, right? I have an estimate, but just talk through,
Right.
because there's 2024, which we know we're not going to be back in the home, and then there's 2025, and your taxes have to be already paid for 2024, and there's all those things. So can you kind of talk through that rebate process and
Sure,
what that looks
sure.
like?
Yeah, so there's a partial property tax rebate for 2024, but it can't be paid out by the tax collector until 2025. So we recommend to wait till January 1 to actually do the application. But if you know you're going to be displaced past January 1, just put the number of days between the storm and the end of the year in for your days displaced, and say, we know we're not going to be back in before then. So that is
For
a way.
24.
Correct. Yeah, this doesn't go into 25. 25 won't matter because there's going to be a revaluation as of January 1. So if people have, storm damage at that point that hasn't been repaired, we're going to be adjusting improvement values at that point. Yes.
And just because we said there's no dumb questions, our taxes, if you've paid your taxes, your 2024 taxes are already paid, correct? In other words, the tax bill that we all just got was for 2025.
No.
No,
That's 2024.
that is 2024.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's always in arrears, comes out later. It's based on a January 1 valuation date, but then the millage rates get set, by actually late July, August. Then the trim notice comes out late August, bills in November, and you can start, with the 4% discount with the tax collector in November.
But before you get the rebate, the
You've-
taxes have to be paid.
They have to be current, yes. You
Okay.
can't get the rebate unless you're current. So if you've got outstanding back taxes too, I don't think they're gonna
No,
do
that's not
it
the
either.
question, though. I mean, we all got our tax bill, so I don't,
Right.
mine's not escrowed, so I actually write the check.
Right, gotcha.
So mine has not been paid yet because it's not escrowed.
Okay.
And so I thought, well, why do I have to pay it and then wait for you to give it back to me? But,
And it's not me,
well,
it's not me.
you're uniquely positioned to answer the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, so, and just to be clear, the way the process works, so the property appraiser's office accepts the applications, they come through us. We do the math because I guess they figure we do the math better than the tax collector does. So, and then we hand that on, pass that on to the collector, and then they issue the refunds.
Got it.
But they can't do that till, I think it's going to be at least 6 weeks into January, or January, February.
Okay. Talk about the calamity law and how it relates to those who will be repairing, building, or elevating with less than 110% increase.
Sure. So we've got a lot of homeowners that have been flooded now multiple times. They're finally at that point where they just said, okay, no moss, we're ready to take our home down. We love our neighborhood. We want to stay in this location, but we're gonna rebuild an elevated home. So I've heard, a lot of their friends and neighbors will say, no, don't do that. You're gonna you're going to get killed on taxes because you're going to treat it as new construction. Well, fortunately, there's a provision in state law called the calamity provision that allows you to rebuild a new home up to 110% of your original square footage and maintain your assessed value cap. So your assessed value stays in place, and then any excess over the 110, then that goes on as new construction. So the tricky part is that if it's it's great if you're an at-grade home and say your house burned down. And not that it's great that your house burned down, but it's.
I don't know, I've had a lot of people tell me I wish I should wish it had, that we would have come out better from insurance.
Yeah,
had it.
yeah, I've heard some that say, well, I didn't have flood insurance, so maybe I should go put my EV in the garage and let it catch on
Yep.
fire. So with the calamity provision, you can, if you're at grade, that 110 would certainly be there to make you whole, at grade. But now you're elevating, and if you want to have any sort of an enclosure below, which most people do, they don't want their cars sitting out in the elements, or they want the security of an enclosure down below. So they're going to have generally an oversized garage, maybe you might call it a super adequate garage, bigger than what you would normally build, but it's below your elevated home. That is going to end up taking your square footage over the 110, but we use a thing called effective area that is a weighting of the square footages. So, your living area is considered, we call that base, and that's basically 1-to-1, that's 100% of the direct costs. If it's a garage, for example, an enclosed garage, that's only like 35%. So the amount that goes on the tax roll as a result of that additional square footage over the 110 is typically, dramatically less on a square foot basis.
Great, thank you. Okay, I am calling it.
Question before he goes?
Yes,
before you
well,
call it?
I was going to say to open the floor for Q&A. So.
Okay, so this is a question I have, that I'm seeing people now buying a flooded home, a new buyer, and it's repairable, so they're gonna repair it. But is there any way, like say someone's closing in January, the damage is done by the previous thing, so you're gonna reevaluate, like in January when you set taxes, or December, that home is not where it was prior to the flood. So I'm just thinking, when the new buyer comes into taxes, there gonna be an adjustment down on, like, it's still a damage, like the permits haven't been pulled, they haven't done any work because they don't own it yet.
Right. Well, January 1 is a snapshot in time. So we're going to try and value it as close to the condition that it was at that point in time. So there's going to be a lot of follow-up and a lot of, we may be high or low on some of these, and we're going to have to find out more information, because here we're going to have a lot of properties that have an SD letter sent out on them, but we don't know if they're by January 1, if they're necessarily recoverable or not. They're going to go through this reassessment process, and a lot of those will be repaired and be fine. And others, those improvements will literally go to zero, because they're going to have to come down, or the owner's going to decide to knock them down and go up. So it's a mixed bag. We're going to have a lot of work to do.
All right, so before we let them go, does anybody have questions that they would like to ask the panel? Yes, ma'am. Barry and Stephanie are still here, so I'll let you guys.
New is always better from an insurance perspective. Brand new construction, like 2002 to 2012, those are kind of the two sweet spot years in Florida, especially west and over here. New's always better. Not every carrier likes pylons, so not every homeowner's carrier will take your home if you elevate it certain ways. So that's also something to consider. Not all homeowners carriers like every way that you do it. New is always better. You just get a builder's risk policy for the interim while you're rebuilding, renovating, whatever. I'm not a mortgage person, but it should be seamless as far
Yeah.
as builder's risk policies.
On the mortgage, so your mortgage, it's going to be hit or miss on each one, but if you have a Fannie Freddie mortgage, they do have a requirement for you to keep insurance. So you need to do the builder's risk aspect of that. Each mortgage company is going to change that. They're going to determine if they want the insurance check that's helping you rebuild this directly, then you're going to have to refinance probably to do a construction loan, something like that. That's kind of the typical way. The main question I've been getting as an attorney is why would I want to do this if, you know, like I want to get over FEMA 50% and get out of that, right? The reason why you would want to try to build a second level on the first one is ordinances. A lot of these spots, such as Sunset Beach, they are grandfathered in for their setback rules. So you may want to use the footprint. You need to use the footprint though. Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. You have to use the footprint. Yeah. If you use, so most municipalities will even go, because it depends here at this point, right? But most municipalities are going to go with the footprint there. If you demolish, you're gone from the grandfathering in. That's the big takeaway on that, is why you're looking and thinking about this, is you're going to want to look at the ordinances. She's correct. Each one is not going to be the same. But if you demolish it, you have no shot at getting the grandfathered in. So that's typically, and again, it depends on which spot you're at, but those could be 30-foot setbacks at this point in an area where you were on a 40 by 40 lot. So you just built a closet in some of these spots, right? You got to be careful for what you're doing on that end, and you want to hire professionals such as an architect and whatnot to explore all your options, because this is an expensive process. The lifting doesn't just happen without it being cheap, and you definitely need to make sure that you don't make a rash decision in demolishing the house either. That's one of the biggest issues I've seen is I've had some sellers say we're just demolishing the house, and then they've basically gotten a land that's going to be troublesome for a future buyer. So.
Can I just add 2 seconds when people are selling and they're getting these ideas of what to do and they're going to get these SD letters that are a little overwhelming. And I'm seeing living on the beaches a wide spectrum. So a lot of people, again, are, you know, what I'm seeing is people that are not familiar with waterfront and maybe not the values, they are listing these homes at very low values, right? Like in my own neighborhood, houses where the value of it alone was 900, somebody just bought it for 600 and that house is repairable with a seawall and a dock. Now, like on the flip side, again, in Indian Rocks Beach, there's ones under contract that are close to the land value of the property appraiser. And again, you should be looking at the pool and the what. So it is important if you are someone, there's all these complications about when it comes to if you are going to sell, like what is the person going to do with it, or if you're helping someone buy, all those things are really important to get, you know, pause and get a good real estate professional, like someone that's knowing this stuff, and like you said, architects and all, but these rash decisions a little bit in fear are it's going to be interesting to see what Mike Twitty's valuations are in our neighborhood, because it's been a lot of fear selling that is, again, I mean, good for the buyer that got it, but you know, there are people here and out there that can defend your equity and at least let you know what is the value. But if look to the people that have worked in those communities that understand that.
But there's also repercussions from the buyer perspective, from my understanding, and that was part of what we were going to talk about later, is that then the look back rule applies to them and they don't necessarily have the opportunity to fix the things, correct? No? That's what,
Not coming out of the SD, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not under the SD.
If you're
As
in
long-
substantial improvement, yes.
They are going to be limited by the substantial damage. That
Yeah.
stays with the property.
Everybody's getting a free pass right now. Now, into the future, how we set up, that's a whole different, but they've kind of, to the best of my knowledge, the cities have all said, this substantial damage package that we're gonna do for this is gonna meet these guidelines, and so the look back's being kind of waived right now.
Essentially, the permit that you pull to do this is a hurricane rebuilding permit. So they look at that, that's going to be different. But you are, as a future buyer, still subject to the substantial damage 50% aspect that is on that property. So you can't say, okay, the way I'm going to get around the FEMA 50% rules, I'm going to sell it to my brother who can then go and do all the work because it was tagged to me. No, it's tagged to the property. So buyers need to do due diligence of what their game plan is on that property. So. So there are, thankfully, most of, and you're going to want to go down to some of these spots. I'm going to paint with a broad brush, and I know that there's exceptions where not everybody has everything online. But online, you can see what type of permits have been pulled. The reality is right now, because a lot of people are having to wait for the substantial damage letters to be given out before they can actually have the permits approved or anything, it's going to be a little bit more hazy right now, a little gray area. But you can definitely, as I'm representing a buyer right now, we got the substantial damage letter. We know it's not substantially damaged. So that was number one, good. That was where, as representing a buyer, I'm really happy, not substantially damaged. Second thing I'm going to look at is, okay, let's go see what type of permits they've already pulled for remediation. If they've done what I like to call the OOPS permit, it's not an OOPS permit, it's an after the fact permit. But essentially what most of the municipalities did was they allowed you to rip out the drywall in the, because nobody wants mold continuing to grow, right? So rip out that drywall, get it done, and then apply for the demolition permit afterwards. So we want to look and see, hey, has that already been pulled? Because I want to know what that calculation, so like Madeira Beach has a specific calculation for the amount of drywall removed. So that could go into what my future buyer, when they do the hurricane rebuild permit, because they're going to be the one that'll own it at that point, they need to know what that OOPS permit cost is going to go towards that. So we're just kind of running all the numbers, but you're looking online, you're looking if you have to go in person to the building departments, you're trying to see what permits have already been pulled to catch us up to that. We're in that stage where people may or may not have pulled those permits yet. In 3 months, buyers are really going to want to pay attention to that because by then we're 6 months removed from the storm. More than likely people have pulled those permits.
One more thing, if people are used to, like Indian Rocks Beach used to, has no look back, or St. Petersburg, so people might have in the past had an experience and they did an improvement, they did a kitchen, then they did a bath, then they did something else, and it all worked. This is going to be inclusive, and my understanding is, so I believe that it needs to then, whatever you spend, FEMA wants it to go one more year before you get to like reset your 50% is my understanding. So it's like you just paid all this money for a storm. So again, it's, the point is people in the past have staged it, and we know they have, people have done it, and there's a mechanism in the substantial damage that they're being super rigid about. It all goes into the permit.
Yeah, so FEMA itself doesn't have the look back period, but what it does is it goes towards the compliance that each municipality shows for that NFIP program so that they can qualify. So if I had back in the day a longer look back period, it looked better for FEMA because we didn't want to substantially improve in certain areas, right? So that was their way of showing compliance. But FEMA does kind of like, it's almost like an IRS rule for the 1031s where they don't have a solid rule, but they're going to want to see a little distance between your last permit and the next one on that aspect. St. Pete does not have a look back period. They are a holistic system in general. And that's kind of why you want to have a little bit of a staging reset if you were in the substantial improvement. We're talking substantial damage after the storm, different rules, so.
Jumping on just to finish up on Calamity, I just wanted to let people know we are developing a tool that'll be on the website. You know, we rolled out our tax estimator years ago, and that's helped a lot of people be able to look ahead and anticipate what they're, you know, if they're buying a new property, what they're going to be facing. Well, we're building a calamity calculator to help people understand what that tax delta or difference might be when they're looking at a rebuild and what that impact might be, what, the amount over the 110. So they'll be able to go in and plug in their living square footage, their garage square footage, play around with it, experiment, and see, it'll be an apples to apples as of that particular tax year that they run it. Now, they might not build the house for 3 years, so they have to realize costs might change, the market might change, so it can move some, but at least gives you a semblance of what that change might be. I'm aware of them, but I'm not fully schooled on them yet to really talk about them. But yeah, the state just rolled out some additional ones. There's like an Elevate Florida plan, and they're going to be rolling out a bunch more information here coming soon. I looked at there are some income qualifications for some of them. Some of others may have a little more latitude. So I encourage people to take a look at those. But I will also say that I know that this is a hot button item for the state legislature this coming session to really dig in and look at flood-related issues, damage-related issues, elevation issues. 2 years ago, we had a constitutional amendment go to the ballot that I championed to actually try and proactively allow people to tap into that calamity rule. And unfortunately, it didn't pass by about 1.5 points because a lot of people didn't really fully understand it. And what it would have done was allow you to lift. You would not have included the area below base flood elevation against you in your assessed value, and you still would have had the 110 up above BFE. And well, it was a constitutional amendment, so those are a tougher sled. So we're looking at some other options. I know the Senate president was interested in it, looking at it through a different lens to see if there's a different way to navigate and maybe do something that didn't require an amendment.
Any other questions?
All right, so you haven't already pulled an owner permit, right? Like at that point, yeah. So you sell it, the next person does an owner pulled permit, they're still going to be stuck by that rule. Like, yeah, yeah. It's one of those things, again, when I usually talk to buyers as well, want to make sure if they're going to be a flipper that they know about that owner pulled permit rule. It is definitely a stickler aspect to a lot of these things, but it's one of those. We're now 3 months from the storm. Hopefully people have gotten a little bit of a game plan as an owner, and it's something that we definitely want to talk through with people when they come talk to any attorney or anybody. If you're a real estate agent, definitely talk to your people to know if they've done that, because it is not a good place to be if you sell after you went and said that you weren't going to sell for a year. People don't like it when you fraudulently fill out forms. So.
That usually comes up and people are impatient right now. They're frustrated, and you can get an owner's permit faster than and a Madeira Beach. And so people are like just wanting back in their house, and they, so just again, it's important that people talk through what that consequence is, just so that they don't find out what that meant. That's all.
I'm glad this came up because we did institute a new process related to people that own properties in a trust. And the way it works now, pretty much around the state, if you try and pull an owner builder permit as the homeowner, but if your property's in a trust, they'll treat you the same as a corporation and they won't issue a permit. And sometimes they'll even tell you to take your property out of the trust, which is not a great idea. And I ran into a young family at the courthouse that had literally just done that and had recorded the deed and taken it back into, and the wife was 39 weeks pregnant, and I was, oh my God, I can't believe you guys just did that. So we started a new process because we review those trust documents when we approve homesteads. So the homestead ones are really easy for us to vet. So we have a owner verification form. So either the property owner can request that from us, or the building department can request it. So if you go into certain jurisdictions, now they haven't, 100% of Pinellas County jurisdictions haven't decided they're going to use it yet. I introduced it a couple of weeks ago on with all the building building departments. We're on a municipal building official call and participated on that. And a lot of them were all requesting the form. They were very excited. I know Pinellas County Unincorporated is on board. City of St. Pete is now on board, and they were real sticky about it before. I think St. Pete Beach just came on, but there were several others that requested them. So just want to let you know that's out there for your property owners too.
I mean, there's a good reason for the rule that Florida has for that 1-year situation. It's partially because there's a lot of contractors that will come out and tell you to pull the permit, but they're actually unlicensed contractors. So please be very careful if you have a contractor telling you, oh no, you pull the owner permit. That's a pretty good red, yeah, I'm gonna call that a red flag, not a beige flag. But that's a red flag that you probably need to go ahead and maybe vet some other contractors, because like, if you're doing it yourself, it's fine, there's no problem, but that rule is there to help a little bit of protection at that point.
All right, I have one more question if nobody else does. Going once, twice. Mike, you guys are doing some pretty innovative and amazing things, and we appreciate you very much. Is there
Thank you.
anything else that's coming out that we should know about? Break the news.
I
here.
hope not. God, my staff's exhausted and I'm exhausted, but we know there's a lot of people out there hurting, and we really, we want to keep pushing forward and trying to, we're trying to put these new processes and tools in place so that people can recover as fast as possible. So if anybody has any great ideas, lay them on me. My staff will hate me for it, but no, they've been great. They've embraced all the things that I've thrown at them. I came to them with the BVR process and thought they were going to call me crazy, and they embraced it, and we figured it out and rolled forward, and now we're doing the calamity calculator, and we'll continue to find neat solutions.
It's awesome. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for sticking with us.
Well,
And
I
thank
wanna
you
say
all
thank
out
you
there.
to all the people who came to sit on the panel, especially the ones who didn't get their chance. And we do plan to have a second panel in January to kind of go through, okay, what happens after all this initial stuff that we did our best to talk through, that has contractors and products and different things that we should all know about. So thank
And
you
all of
guys
it's
for-
all of it's in this information here. So
Okay.
go. I mean, so that QR code or that URL is. I mean, all the people that were here and resources that we've worked with, and then under the real estate I put together, it's a Bitly with says Storm Smart, and it's 14-page guide of all the links to my stuff, links to videos, etc., resources, the cost appraiser. So we knew it was a lot today, so it was like give you something you could look at and work through. And if you need any help getting your Realtor Relief grant in, or anybody, we have lots of realtors that can help you with that too. So we're happy to help, facilitate that. We know that scanning stuff and doing that might not be the easiest for a lot of our families right now. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you guys all for being here.